here in Malaysia. So with that introduction, I'll hand it over to Kingsley. And he's got a brief kind of presentation on what's new on AWS, what it means to you. But feel free to interrupt, change the course of the conversation. Whatever questions you want to get answered, please feel free to kind of break it up. This is a user group meeting, not an AWS pitch, right? That's how it is meant to be at all.
Thanks. So I'm going to assume everyone is, as John said, familiar with AWS. So if you want to just come in really close, I'm going to show a few slides. I don't want to bore you with PowerPoint, definitely not. So I'll race through these very quickly. Those of you, I assume everyone here has got an AWS account, correct?
Yeah.
Probably getting a lot of emails from us. Right? We try not to spam you, but we're so excited about all these new things we're announcing that sometimes it's 2 or 3 times a week. You can keep the same master database running, but you're adding read references to handle the traffic. And the similar, if you've got a database running and it's a pretty big machine, but you can have some of the calls. I mean, our customers are telling us 90% of their queries they can put in front of the database and get it from Elasticache. Much more efficient. They don't need as big a database in RDS. So again, you can reduce your costs because you know you need to keep your master database running all the time. But it's better to run that all the time as a small than to run it a quadruple extra large, right? And then you start putting it all together with different variations. I mean, I won't go into a lot of these details and stuff. Does everyone know about the architecture site we've got? aws.amazon.com/architecture. We've got lots and lots of examples of cloud designing systems with building blocks like that. Just samples that show you what's the best practices of putting all these components together. It's very well written, very well worth reading. And it's very graphical. It's like this, it'll just show you how to use that. And if you start looking at, if you're doing lots of these things, index lookups, user details, username, password, that kind of stuff, sometimes it makes sense to use DynamoDB rather than RDS. So we've got, I think, 6 different database products now. They're not all going to be perfect for each job, but some of them are good, some of them are better for some jobs. What I'm saying is take a variation on that. Yeah? Make sense? I'm just talking blah, 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 blah. So if this is useful, let me know if it's any questions and stuff. There's another cool concept I want to talk about, is cloud formation, right? So I want you to have a mental picture in your head, right? You walk into a data center and there's lots of racks of machines, okay? And in your brain you go, copy, paste, and the hardware just appears, right? You can't do that in a physical world. It's impossible. You can do that in the cloud, right? You can take your infrastructure, which is your web server, your database, your app server, and so on, and using cloud formation, you can take a snapshot of that and just paste, copy, paste, right? And you can just make as many copies as you want. And after an hour, you want to delete it, you just delete it. Cut. Fantastic technique. If you've got your whole web app running on multiple machines, multiple databases, and you have a new employee come in, why don't you just copy and paste, give them a copy of the whole system. So go ahead, go with it. If you break it, after a few hours, switch it off. Copy to the same feature. Right? Fantastic. You can't do that physically, but you can do that virtually in the cloud. You use this technique to make dev and test copies of the whole stack, of the whole application service. You know? It's a really cool way to do that with cloud formation. I'll talk a little bit about this. A lot of companies are using this, like in the games world. I mean, a lot of these guys are saying, what if we charge different number of gold coins for different number of magic wands? Very important in the game world, right? The currency, how do we charge for swords and for all that sort of thing, right? They wanted to experiment. So this company called Ruga, they chose 2 different models. This model up here, they were charging, 10 coins for 5 wands, etc. And then down here, they were charging a different rate. But they built the same system on 2 different parallels, 1A and 1B. So when customers came in, they didn't know which one they were going to get. Some of them went to A, some of them went to B. But they ran it for a few days, and they saw which one makes us more money, which one makes more gold coins, right? And then they switched off the one that was making less money, right? So it's the same thing if you've got a website that sells, sells baskets or whatever, right? And you say this one puts the text on the left and the picture on the right, this one puts the text on the right, the picture on the left. See which one makes more money? Switch off the one that doesn't work. Experiment. And your users don't even know they're being experimented on. You're playing tricks with them, but they don't even know. I mean, Amazon got into a lot of trouble a few years ago because we started doing this with pricing. We said, oh, we sell CDs for $10, but then we're going to sell the same CD for $8 to some people with their name from A to G, and all those people from letters of names from C to Z, we're going to charge $12, right? So when people went to the website, they didn't know which category to win, but some people got $8 price, some to $10 price, some to $12 price. And so which one sold more? And then they suddenly found, oh, the people, if we make it $12, people buy it more often, and they buy the T-shirt. So we keep the price at $12, right? These are all different techniques, right? You can experiment with this A/B testing, A/B prototyping. But it's very easy to take a complete copy of your whole system and duplicate it like that. Anyway, that gives you some idea. So, again, tired of talking. Ask me some questions. Does that help? Is that new, interesting? You knew it all before? Huh? Yep. What's that? Very quiet bunch, yeah? Sure, let me show you the climate. Yeah. Right.
It would be really good to use, I wanted to have it be in 7 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Oh, like on a time basis. Yeah. So you can do that with Oxford. You can set up to start at a certain time and end at a certain time. You can also do it with an auto-scaling group. Does everyone play with auto-scaling? You can say, you want to start at a certain time and end at a certain time. So let me show you a technique that you can use in CloudWatch. I have a machine running here. It's just a Linux machine. And what I've done is I've set up monitoring on it. And I'm looking at the CPU utilization. And I've set up an alarm on it. I want to show you the alarm. Hope everyone can read this here. If I look at the alarm, what I've told it is, now it's opening up the CloudWatch. Okay, so you can see this alarm. You see the data points here. The CPU, when I booted it up, it was running at about 4.5%. And then for the last few hours that it's been running, it's been hovering between 1 and 0%. So the machine's not running very hard. Okay? Let me show you what the machine is doing, just for interest. If you go to, and you guys can do this as well, you go to LBR, load balancing review.myabulos.com, it's just hitting the website and pulls up this PHP page. It's a very simple page. It's got a bit of text. It says, what's your instance ID? Where are you? It's in AP Southeast 1A, which is another word for Singapore, right? What's the time? 2052. And then it says, I want you to show this picture. And this picture is in S3 in CloudFront. So it pulls the HTML from the PHP file, it pulls the picture, puts it together, it's the web page. Very simple, right? And if I go like this, refresh, and we keep going. Okay. So now what I've done is that machine has been running for a few hours. If I say I've got this alarm, which is okay at the moment because anything above 0 is okay. Now I'll say I want to modify it. I'm going to say if the CPU utilization, okay, is less than, let's make that 3% for, let's make it 10 minutes, or let's make it fast. Hold on, 10 minutes. Let's make it like that. So basically I've told it now, if the CPU, and it's measuring it every 5 minutes, right? If 2 measurements in a row are below 3%, then I want it to do what? Well, this is the new magic we just added there. So I'm going to say continue on that. It's fun when you're doing demos in front of a crowd, right? Let's try. And we modify if it's less than 3% for, see how the line jumps up here, right? For 10 minutes. Okay. It's chosen for 3 consecutive periods. Okay. Now, let me try and open this a bit bigger. Alright. So, 2 things I wanted to do. If the CPU is below 3% for more than 15 minutes, I wanted to do 2 things. The first thing I wanted to do is, if it goes to alarm, I want to stop the EC2 instance. Notice I didn't say terminate, I said stop. Okay, so I don't lose the data, It's just like shutting the top of the laptop down. Stop the instance, right? Then, also wanted to send me a notification, right? Who knows what's the name of our service that we use for sending out messages? There's a book. SMS. Correct. That was quick. Couldn't even reach the book fast enough. Good. So with SMS you can do three things, right? You can send an HTTP call to another web server. You can send an email to an endpoint. And if you're in the US, you can send an SMS message to a cell phone. Unfortunately, we don't have SMS support outside of the US yet. But you can use it to send an HTML or a web page to another server that could in itself send an SMS message. But it sends a notification, right? Now, I've already subscribed to Kingsley's transcribed topics. There's my email address. So I'm saying when the system goes below, send a message and stop the instance. Okay? So that all looks good. And I've set that up, and I'm going to continue on that. Okay. Save the alarm. Good. Now, that machine, we know that it's been running idle for the last 15 minutes. As I talk now, you'll see that if I come down to the specifics here, and I zoom this up, you can see the data hasn't been running very hard, right? Maybe in the last few minutes I've accessed it maybe 10 times, so it won't even run above 2%. So if we leave that now for 10, 15 minutes, it'll shut down. So at the end of this user group, when I walk home, I know that it's not going to keep running all through the night, right? It's going to switch off. But just by doing that, you've enabled that whole machine to be able to shut itself down, right? It's like walking out of the shower and the shower turns itself off when you're not in the shower anymore. Great technique, right? If you add this capability to every one of your instances, imagine how much money you'll save. Especially if you're not going to be using them for a while, right? And because I've stopped it, I can always go back in later on and just click on it and start it again. Make sense? What automatically? You can, if you make a call, if you've got a script, if you've got an API call, right? If you make it in Oxford, you can actually say start at 7 a.m. on a certain time, right?
So if I wake up at 3 a.m. and I want to check just the message,
Yeah,
it'll be down.
it'll be down. But if you say start, oh, this is a great thing. I didn't want to forget to tell you this. But you reach over and you grab your iPhone and you start up this new cool web app. I'll show you. We just released this a week ago. AWS Console iPhone app, right? It's free. You can download it. You can click on that, and it says, I'm just going to connect now. It says got a list of all my EC2 instances. So I can click on that, and I see one of the instances is there. That's the machine I want, and it's stopped right now. And I click start. How cool is that?
You can call it if it supports Android.
Yeah, it's coming to Android. Yeah. Of course, you can do this by logging into the console yourself on a web page, but we just made a very cool app to make it very tight like that, right? Anyway, I'm trying to give you some ideas on how to run this, right? Who here has used Route 53? Yeah, you used it a little bit. Good. Does everyone know what Route 53 does? The DNS service. Yeah. DNS service. So let me show you some tricks here on DNS. I've got this domain. I don't know if you can read it there. I bought this domain. It's a very, very cool domain called myaws.info. Okay? So I want to show you what I've done with that domain. And if any of you have got a device open now, you can try this out. So the first thing I did is I put the main server of myaws.info to Route 53. Right? So I bought it on GoDaddy for $9.99 a year, and I put it onto Route 53. The next thing I said is for www.myaws.info. All right, I wanted to hit this crazy value. Who recognizes that? CloudFront distribution. Correct. So let me open up my CloudFront distribution and show you what I did there. So if you go now to www.myaws.info, you'll get this. There it is there. Right? And this is my web server that's not running on a web server. Because there's no machine running here, there's no instance. All that's doing is it's hitting the CloudFront distribution, which is pointed to my bucket in S3, and it's serving up the web page. So it's a very cool website. You can see it's got my logo, it's got some text, it's got the time. I have thousands of people viewing it all the time. Just kidding, right? So no one goes to my website. I don't know why. It's not that boring, right? But if no one goes to it for a whole month, my charge from Amazon is less than 1 cent. Because I only have to pay for the storage of the image and the storage of the text. That's it, right? And if I show you just how simple this is, in CloudFront, if I look at this distribution in CloudFront, what I've said is, and from that, click on distribution settings. I'll try and make this a bit bigger for you. You can see that the distribution is live, which means anyone in the world can see my website, right? If you're in New York, or you're in South America, or if you're in Germany, whatever, you can get to www.myaws.info, right? The origins that I've said is, if you are getting some content from this, I want you to look at my bucket in S3. So my bucket here is kingsley.web, kingsley.media, kingsley.demo. But we've got this concept in CloudFront called behaviors, okay? And this is where you can actually direct the content based on the different requests. If I say someone's looking for a JPEG file, I want it to go to this bucket, kingsley.demo. If someone's looking for a HTML file, it's going to kingsley.web. Different paths, right? Let me show you one more thing now. I'm going to open up S3 bucket so you can see where I'm actually pointing at. In my S3 bucket, over here, I'm going to look at kingsley.demo, and sure enough, there's AWS logo, right? And if I open that, it's that logo. So let's take the whole story back now. I've got my bucket in AWS S3, right, with my picture JPEG, and that's in kingsley.demo. My CloudFront distribution says that if anyone asks for anything with a JPEG, go to this bucket, and that's where the picture is, right? Anything with a JPEG, go to that bucket, right? Then I go back one step to right-click and it says, if you go to www.myaws.info, no matter what they want, I want you to go to this CloudFront distribution. So you see the chain, right? Route 53 to CloudFront to S3, right? If someone's asking for an HTML file or the index page, like index.php, the root page, I want it to go to the S3 bucket called web. So if I go to kingsley.web, you'll see under there it is, index.html, index.php, right? It's just static files. There's no server running. There's no big machine humming away. The PHP won't work, but the PHP is not what I'm pointing at there. It's an HTML file for the original file. So once it's rendered once into HTML, you can store that as a static, correct? Yeah. And that's a great point. It's because if you have a web server with a PHP, that's a dynamic interchange, right? If that website goes down, you default back to the HTML. You might have seen if you guys have used Twitter and it goes through a bad period of too busy, you get the fail whale, right? Fail whale is static, not swimming around it, right? It's just static. So that's how they direct that traffic over there. Same concept. One more thing now with Route 53. I've told it, I've got this concept called LBR. It's a load balancing, it's a review of the content based on where you are, right? So what it does is it routes based on the latency. I've told it I've got two LBRs that my AWS.info. One is pointing to Oregon, the US West Coast, and this one here is pointing to Singapore. Now we are in Malaysia, and I go to LBR.my AWS.info and I look at that, okay? Oh, not going to go now. I think I switched that one off. But basically what I'm telling it is, it goes to this load balancer, which is in Singapore. If the customer is closer to Oregon, then you should go to Oregon. And we will decide that for you automatically. Based on where the customer is when they make the request, we will direct them to the correct load balancer. And you can have one in each region if you wanted. But each one of those regions, if I go back to the T2 now, and I look at my load balancer here, there we go. I think I know what might have happened here. There's my load balancer in Singapore, and if I look at the instances underneath it, my one machine is out of service, right? Can everyone see that? That machine is no longer running. So if I go back to my instances, let's see what happens. The machine is, let's refresh here. Is it still running? For some reason it hasn't. So, it stopped. Now why do you think it stopped? Exactly, the alarm went off. While we were talking, let's see if we pull it up here. Yep, the alarm has gone off. Why? Because the CPU was below 3% for longer than 15 minutes. So just since I said it, and while we were talking, right, it said, what's the CPU? What's the CPU? Up 3 times in a row below 3%, switch the machine off. So my system's down now. And obviously we can go back and start mapping up, and it's up to you. I mean, a website, if you're going to run a website, you're going to keep one machine running all the time, and you can add more machines, but you never want to go below one because you don't want your machine to go, your web service to go off completely, right?
Like less options, I mean, if let's say you're using Craftsman, right? Because you have a lot of each. Compared to the Route 52, you have the latency, routing.
The routing, right.
So which is the best option to use?
Good question, yeah. So if your distribution is simply with static content, we've got 39 edge locations now, and we will determine which is the closest edge location. What's important about Route 53 is you're actually directing a CNAME on your website. We can talk, so it's basically your time, very informal. We can do some demos. I've got my connection running, so we can do a couple of demos using the actual systems, right? So now I'm going to be on YouTube, Twitter, video. I'm going to be on live all these things very soon, right? So as you know, the thing about AWS that's hard for all of us to keep up to date is the pace of innovation, right? We just keep adding things all the time. Just last year, we released 158 new products and features. So you've got emails, each one telling you a new thing, new announcement. I hope one of the things you noticed was that the last 6 years, since I've been at the company, we've dropped the prices 29 times. So you won't see an email from us saying we've raised prices, it's always how we drop prices, right? It's very cool that we're doing it. So those are not things that you have to sign up for or opt into. When we drop the prices, you just get a lower bill the next month, right, using those kind of technology. So what we do a lot of is listen to customers. It's very important for us, right? So if you have feedback, if you say, hey, this product works great, but we want this or that, tell us all the time. Send us email, tell John, tell me, because we listen to that and then we use that to change the product and evolve the services as we go along, right? So that's really important to us. So some of the things we can talk about, some of the enhancements we've had. You know, I'm going to cover some of these products. You may or may not be using some of these products, but I just want to tell you about some of the new advances that we've had on them. Something like Beanstalk. Who here has used Beanstalk and tried it out? Anyone?
Kind of.
Kind of. It's fantastic. You should really give it a go. Now, let me explain where Beanstalk fits. If you're really super technical and you know how to do everything yourself, you're going to start off with a raw EC2 instance. You're going to install the software. You're going to install MySQL. You're going to configure it. That's for the experts, right? On the whole other side of the spectrum, we have a new product called Opsworks, right? You've seen that, where you can tell it, I want a PHP platform, and here's my system and setup, and just go for it. Somewhere in between there is Beanstalk. If you have the code, and it's code in PHP or .NET or Python or Ruby, you give us the code, and we will set up the EC2 machine, set up the load balancer, set up the database, configure everything, and get it up and running. And then when more and more users come to that web app, more and more applications get used more, we will automatically scale it. So we'll auto-scale it, we'll add more resources. So it's somewhere in between managing it yourself, which is for the experts, and completely offhand someone else doing it for you. It's somewhere in between, that's what's useful. So just bear in mind that you can use this, you can import your code, your source code, just throw it at us, we'll spin up all the instances for you. That's what Beanstalk's all about. Who knows about virtual private cloud? Yeah, you guys are using that? If you've got a business that you're using infrastructure in your own on-premises, right, in your own building, and you want to extend that with some instances in the cloud, VPC lets you put your machine and the machines in Amazon on the same subnet, on the same network. You can choose how to configure your network so those machines they seem like they're on the same network. Even though some of them are in your office in Malaysia, some of them are in Singapore, but they're all on the same network, on the same virtual private cloud, right? So that's some of the addressing. I won't get into all the specifics of this, but we've just had continual improvement with this virtual private cloud. You can choose your subnet, your IP network, right? You can decide how to architect it and how to build it. It's very much more efficient. We've added all these services that you're familiar with, EC2, RDS, DLB, EMR, all that stuff runs now in virtual private cloud. The database option, I'm interested, who uses Microsoft MS SQL Server? Is that a big one? You? Okay. What about Oracle? There's too much hassle, huh? Right? And what about MySQL? That's the main one, right? Most people use that. So you know all three of those run in RDS. But we've had some big improvements to RDS recently. You can expand your database up to 3 terabytes now. We've got much higher speed IOPS for very high performance RDS. All of these options, like, does anyone know what multi-AZ means when I say multi-AZ? You know how you have multiple availability zones? Much more reliable system setup, always use multi-AZ. A lot of those kind of formats and so on just keep evolving with RDS. I'm not going to talk, I'll talk a little bit more about the databases in a minute and I'll show you some best practices. But CloudFront, this is such an important function. If you are using any system that deploys software or content or JPEGs or movie files or even CSS files out to your customers, if you're writing a web app at all, right, it works on an iPhone or an iPad or so on, use CloudFront to take all your static content out to the web. It makes your systems run cooler. Your web servers have to do less work if all of your static content goes out through CloudFront. And I'll show you some of the examples of that in a minute. We can go through some of the architecture there. Live streaming, just back on there, live streaming of video is now supported. If you haven't started using that, it's fantastic. If any of your customers want video, maybe it's video stored in archives, or you want video on demand, or video live streaming and stuff, all of that's supported in CloudFront as well now. Not a lot of people realize how effective it is to use it. We don't want you to spend time configuring live streaming servers when you can just use CloudFront. It's much easier just to switch this on and work with it. Elastic MapReduce, I know some of you are starting to get into big data. So it's quite a buzzword now, everyone's talking about it, but that's kind of one of the big improvements lately. CloudWatch, I'll show you some of the metric engines that we've added to this. One of the tricks we added recently was you can watch the CPU of your instances. And you can say, when it gets below a certain point, stop the machine. Now, why would right? And the machine is going to start running cold, right? No one's using it. Why not just switch the machine off until I come back on Monday morning? Save yourself a lot of money, right? We really encourage you to switch the shower off. That's the analogy I always give. You get up in the morning, you get in the shower, and you go to work. You don't leave the shower running all day, right? That would be crazy, wasting water. So if you switch the shower off, why don't you switch the machine off when you don't use it? Save yourself so much money. So many people, most people, are just leaving their machines running all the time. Especially if you bought the hardware, it's plugged in your data center, you're not switching it off, right? So we keep reiterating that, and I'll show you how to put the alarm actions on in a minute. S3 just crossed the first trillion objects, just continues to grow. Does everyone know about the domain website hosting on S3? Can I talk about that a minute? If you've got a web server that's serving up a web page, that web page is just static, it's just HTML page with 2 pictures, right? You can switch that server off. If you just put the content, the HTML and the JPEG into S3, you don't need to run the web server anymore. And you're only paying for the data that gets transferred out of S3 with CloudFront. It's so easy to do that. You can literally run a website which serves 500,000 people for less than $1 a year. Crazy cheap, right? People just don't realize how effective that is. A good way to use that as well is if you want a backup. If you have a big web application running, but when it crashes, if it goes down, if the website fails or there's a bug in the code or something, just have it redirect to the static website. So there's always a backup, there's always going to be a presence there. There's nothing worse than your customers trying to access your website and you get an unavailable or service unavailable, right? We don't want to ever see that. So that's what you can help with that. EBS has improved a lot over the last 6 months to a year. A lot of faster IOPS are now supported. A lot of the instances, the EC2 instances, can have what we call enhanced, optimized for EBS support. And the reason why we're doing that is we now have machines with 2 network cards. One for all the normal AWS traffic, one of the cards is dedicated just for EBS traffic. So the IOs are much higher, much more reliable, right? So take advantage of that as well. You're paying a little bit more, but you're basically choosing to have an optimized instance for EBS. Storage Gateway. This is a fantastic service if you don't know about this. You basically set up a VM in your environment, in your office, and you provision a storage system on Amazon, which is much, much bigger, let's say it's 30 terabytes, then all of your machines in your local office can just dump stuff in there, and it'll trickle it out to S3. So it gets all the reliability of storing in S3, but it's available locally because it's cached, right? So everything local that you pull or push is in the local cache, and as things get colder and so on, it just moves it up to S3. So look into Storage Gateway as well as a way of dramatically adding storage. I don't want to hear any of you spend money on physical storage, right? You went out and bought 20 terabytes of storage, and that's crazy, right? You just use storage in the cloud, much, much more cheaper and obviously more reliable and so on. We're continuing to add edge locations. We're up to 39 now. I was going to ask a question. Am I supposed to give out prizes, Dan? We're going to ask this. So who can tell me what city we just added a region in? Sydney, great. All right, easy question. Look at that. That was easy. We're giving it harder than that. So, and we're rolling out all these services to all the regions as we go along. But the Australians are always making a big noise because we weren't in Sydney. And as you know, Australia is a little bit further away from everyone else. So now we've got a region in there. We've got multiple availability zones. They've got a full region there as well.
Is that what you're going to do? Make some money to get AWS to come to Malaysia?
I'm just going to keep shouting, yeah. but you guys have got nothing to complain about. You're less than 20 milliseconds away from Singapore. It's close, yeah. You're right. Unfortunately, we can't be in every country yet. We have customers in 190 countries. So bear in mind that we're in the US, in Europe, in South America, Japan, and in Singapore and Australia. We've got another 185 countries to go, right? So we're trying to catch up, but it takes a bit of time, right? If you've come across an example where it's a problem that your database is not stored in Malaysia, we want to hear about it. Maybe it's your customer that's complained, no, the data must be in Malaysia, right? But as I told everyone this morning, we have some customers, like when I go to the Philippines, they say, oh, the database is stored in Singapore? Good. It's not in the Philippines? Good. They like it. So you can't make everyone happy, but some countries insist on the data being in that country. In Europe, the case is it must be in the European Union. So even though our region physically is in Dublin and Ireland is part of the EU, so technically, legally, it's within the EU. But still, when we go to Switzerland, we have customers there that go, no, it must be in Switzerland. We don't have a data center there. We can't help you. Right? So that's one of the balances there. Okay, so we've got a whole bunch of new services as well. One of the most exciting ones is this new one called Glacier. Yeah, has everyone heard about that? It dramatically drops the price of archiving, right? But there's a penalty there. You can't get your data immediately, right? It's stored at 1 cent per gig per month, which is ridiculously cheap. But if you need the data, you have to say, I want the data, and you wait maybe 2 or 3 hours for us to get it. All right? What's our secret? Do we know how we do it in Amazon? Do you understand how we drop the price so much? We turn the power off. Seriously. So we have all these massive storage systems. We put the data in Glacier, and then when it's on a storage system, on a drive, we switch the drive off. So we're not running the power all the time. Then when you need the data, we say, oh, that's on machine number 75. When you switch the power on, switch it up, switch it on, bring the data back, there's your data. But it takes us sometimes 2 or 3 hours. Because our most expensive part of running AWS is the power. So if we can turn off all those hard drives, when we know the customer's data is on there but safe, we can switch it off, we can save a lot of money. That's how we give you those savings. If you need the data immediately, if you need it all the time, then you keep it in S3, no problem, right? But you can also put rules in place. You can say, if I put data into S3 and it stays there for 6 months, then put it in Glacier. Because after 6 months, I probably don't need it for a while, right? I don't want to delete it, but I just want to move it. So we set up a rule that moves the data across. So if you started storing stuff in S3, as it starts to get 6 months old, it just goes to Glacier. Or maybe when it's 1 week old or 1 year old or whatever it is. All right? You can save huge amounts of money, especially as your data starts to increase. Everyone's taking pictures, videos all the time, right? That data is pouring into S3. So more and more we're going to get this need to store things very cheap but very reliable. Elastic Transcoder, very cool service. I don't know if you guys have played with it yet. It is so easy to use. You put a video into S3 and you say I want to convert it to iPad or convert it to iPhone or Android format. And we just charge per minute of the video. Sometimes you charge a little bit less for standard def, sometimes more for high def, but you can convert a video, and I'll show you an example just now of how easy that is as well. And then our biggest announcement recently was this Redshift, right? Data warehousing. So for those of you who are into massive amounts of data, if you're starting to work with big data, that's one of the coolest new technologies we've got. It's 10 times faster than a lot of the competition. It's 10 times cheaper than a lot of the competition. So it's 100 times improvement with new technology, right? This is fantastic there. We can talk in more detail about that as well. DynamoDB, I've got a little video I can show in a minute if you want. The concept here, this is a NoSQL database, right? Who here is using a NoSQL database? Anyone? Yeah? What are you using? Mongo? Mongo? So if you want to run your own NoSQL, run Mongo on EC2 or run it yourself, DynamoDB is just a new variant of that. It's our variant of that, right? The cool thing about it is you're paying for a certain number of reads and writes per unit of time, right? It's not like a database like RDS that just keeps running all the time. DynamoDB is servicing you your request on a certain rate, a certain number of thousands of transactions per minute, per second, whatever it is that you need. If you want to change that, you can just dial it up or down. But you decide how many reads and writes you need per minute. If your system is not very busy, dial it down. If it starts to get busy at a certain time, dial it up. So again, you're able to control the bill by variation of phase. So I won't go into workflow and talk about cloud search a bit. There's Glacier. Bear in mind that Glacier stores at the same 11 nines of durability, right? Everyone knows what that means in terms of half life. 1 million objects stored for 100,000 years. And you start to see that's the crack in the possibility of something going wrong. It's unimaginable, right? So the whole concept there of backups and archive, where you store your stuff reliably, has just changed dramatically to these kind of numbers. I'll skip pipeline and Redshift. We talked about transcoder a bit. Notice that you can use transcoder automatically through the SDK. You can write your own script, your own Java, .NET, PHP. A lot of you are doing startups which involve user-generated content. So people are uploading videos in one format. You want to translate it into another format, right? Everyone knows that if you send a video to YouTube, after a few minutes or whatever, it's ready, and then you can view it in whatever format you want. Well, they're doing the same thing. They're transcoding it. Now you can do that kind of transcoding yourself, much more efficient. We've just released a whole bunch of new EC2 types. I won't get into a huge amount of detail, but notice these huge ones with 244 gigabits of RAM. Amazing, big machines, right? Again, you're just paying by the hour. So if you want to experiment with these machines, try them out for a few hours, switch them off, cost you the same as the people. Very, very simple, you know. So we encourage you to experiment with a lot of these things. The whole idea is that it's not expensive, or there's no commitment to you to just trying these new instance types and so on. I think you're all familiar with a lot of the EC2 stuff, so I won't go into a lot of that. I'll skip on to that. Cost optimization. We want to help you save money by using our services more for less money, right? So some of the tips and tricks I'll talk about today show you not how to spend more with us, but how to spend less. Yeah, if I can show you some of the best practices of architecture and so on. I'm just kind of racing through this because I want to get through to the final thing. And we've seen OpsWorks. Has anyone played with OpsWorks yet? No? It just came out a few weeks ago. We can do a little demo of that as well if we've got time at the end. A very important page I'd like to point you to is the blog. Who knows about the blog here? Yeah? If I can give a book to, who can name the main guy that writes on our blog? Anyone? One, he's famous. Yeah? No? No? He's got his own blog, but not on the main AWS blog. His first name is the same as my boss. My boss, Jeff Bezos. Yeah? What's his last name? Our evangelist. No? No one? I keep the book in. Jeff Barr. Jeff Barr is his name. Read this blog. It's amazing. Every couple of days he writes a fantastic article describing the latest feature of the latest product. It's really worth spending time with it. AWS.typepad.com. You can also go to this webpage. We always say what's new, and it's got a scrolling thing of the news. So I just wanted to race through that as kind of an update on that. I've only had one or two questions. Are you guys Am I going too fast, too slow? Help? Yeah? You want to get onto the best practices? Go ahead.
When are we going to have this meetup for people? Yeah.
When are we going to have what for yet? Free replica. Good question. That's one of the gaps, right? Hasn't quite made it there. I can't give you a date yet. I'm not sure. I'm sure the guys are working on adding it in. Do you desperately need it? Is it a big problem?
Yeah. We use statistical Photoshop, that feature, we have to go to digital.
Ah, okay. So it's a requirement, yeah. I hear you. Thanks, good feedback. One of the workarounds, the solution, is you might want to shard your database. If you can split your database into components to spread the load between multiple examples, that might help. Yeah. One of the tricks, if I can go back here, I think there's something about the sharding. One of the tricks that we enabled, and this isn't ready for Microsoft MS SQL SQL Server yet, but for MySQL and for Oracle, you can do this. If you want to split a database, the old way was to create a new database and then move some of the data into that new database and you split it up, right? The new trick is to create a read replica of the same database, right? Then promote this read replica to its own master, and then delete the data that you don't want and delete the data that you don't want. You've got A and B, you copy A and B, read replica, you promote them both, you delete A here, you delete B here. Now you've got A and B, much more efficient, right? You let us do the copies, it's a little trick. And as soon as we've got read replicas for SQL Server, we'll be able to do that as well. I'm going to jump into another deck here, just to give you an idea. So we had our big event in Vegas last year. It was very exciting to see how many customers were there. I mean, we're all existing AWS customers. Everyone came to hear all the best practices and so on. So what I talked about was media delivery, content delivery. These are all the headaches that you have to deal with. If you try to do it yourself, you get down to a meltdown situation, right? Everyone's seen this? Network card is running so hard, it burns up, right? So what I wanted to let people know is how to use components together, right? These architectures, you use CloudFront with S3, using Route 53, all these components together, right? One of the things I wanted to teach people was, if you're running a whole bunch of web servers, and they're running very hard to serve a whole bunch of customers, right? We want you to think about offloading your static content. If you can take your JPEG, your CSS files, all the movie files, and put them into S3. By doing that, you're using CloudFront to deliver the static content to the customer, right? If you can do that for even some of your content on your web server, you don't need so many web servers anymore. You can actually switch them and more. That dramatically lowers your costs, right? So try to use as little EC2 as you can, because that's your main expense, and offload the content over there. So now your customers are pulling the HTML from EC2 and the static content from CloudFront. Make sense? That's one of the techniques you can use that. If you can think of your web service, any part of your content that's static, that's the same for every customer, just move it into S3, distribute it with CloudFront. Yeah? Good example of this is a company called Perks. They do a lot of these loyalty, you get a chop when you go to Subway or you go to this restaurant or that restaurant and so on. But if you're walking around, all of these little pictures, the icons, are all static content. So none of these are residing on EC2 or on S3 and CloudFront. So their EC2 servers are much, much smaller than they would have to be if they had to serve the content from there. But then they have dynamic content as well. So depending on where you are, it depends on your location, that specific response is just for you. So that dynamic content can now be served through CloudFront as well, right? They're much more efficient. So you can actually get the users, instead of hitting the EC2 server at all, they go through CloudFront instead. Yeah? A good example of this is in India, where they have the cricket matches, huge amounts of traffic when those happen. So what we do there is we say, if the score has come up, right? If some guy bowls, it's a 6, everyone goes crazy, that's the score, right? You put the score and it's cached in CloudFront, so that every user who asks, what's the score, he's not going to have to go all the way back to EC2. He's going to get his response from CloudFront. So if you get 1,000 people asking what's the score in 1 minute, those 1,000 requests all coming from CloudFront. Only one request is made to EC2. If they all had to go back to EC2, you need a quadruple extra large with, burger and a fries, right? You need a massive machine to handle all that. So if you can offload it to the front, to the edge location, you can get much more efficiency. That's how to do that, right? What about managing traffic? Who here is using elastic load balancer, ELB? Yeah? Quite a few of you? This is so important. This can really save you a lot of time. Let me show you why. Even if you're using just one machine, put it behind a load balancer. If you're doing that, what do you give your customers? You give your customers a stable DNS to always reach the same address. Okay? But by doing that, if you decide to go to two machines, there's no change to the customer, right? The client doesn't have to go back and change the IP address or change the DNS. They're still going to the same load balancer. Now you decide, I'm going to go from two machines, I want to change my version. So maybe I want to move one machine to version 2, and the other machine is still on version 1, right? The ability for you to do that, when both machines are behind the load balancer, you're still getting an uninterrupted service to your customer. So the best practice is to keep the service running at all times. You never want the customer to say, oh, system unavailable. Or you remember the old days they used to say, down for maintenance. What does that mean, down for maintenance? They're not using a load balancer, right? Because once you move everything to version 2, then the customer is now using all version 2. But before that, some of them are using version 1, some are using version 2, but there's no interruption. Right? The critical thing about web apps and iPhone apps and iPad apps, especially with a global market, you don't ever want to interrupt the service. You don't know what time your customers are awake, what time they want to play the game, or what time they want to access your payment gateway or whatever, right? They just have to be up and running all the time. And as you go from 2 machines to 8 machines to 15 machines, your number of users increases. The whole time everything's behind the load balancer, right? Now if you start to use things like auto-scaling, where you're saying adding machines and removing machines because of the day, time of day, maybe the amount of traffic, maybe it's on a holiday, you get a big spike in traffic. You want to do all that behind the load balancer. Right? So always use a load balancer in front. And then with CloudWatch and metrics and so on, one of the big advantages is now you can start to spread your application to multiple availability zones, making it much more redundant. Right? If you ever have an experience where some of your machines have a bug in them, some of them crash, you're not going to be affected. Your users are still going to be able to distribute their traffic to the other machines around that. Yeah? A good example of this is very smart. Singapore Press Holdings. They've got a web app, iPhone app, and iPad app called Straits Times. They really have a smart idea here. Whenever a piece of news comes out, people get a ping on their iPhone. Oh, there's a piece of news. What do you think they do? They show me the news, show me the results. Who won the election or what's the big gossip or something, right? So what they do is they have just one big machine running all the time behind the load balancer. Right? And you got all your users waiting. Now, when SPH has a piece of news that comes out, they don't tell all the users right away. What they do is they tell the application, hey, I've got a piece of news. But before I announce it to the world, I'm going to give you a bit of a head start. So what I want you to do is start up a whole bunch of more machines. So they add more machines to the network, right? That takes about 6 minutes to get all those machines running. But now, after 6 minutes, they say, okay, now we're ready. Now we can handle it. Now they send the news alert, which comes out on your iPad and iPhone. So what do you think people do? They go, hey, the news, whatever. Let's go find out. So millions of people all of a sudden come back and it's the traffic. But these guys are ready because they've started up all the machines. The load balancer handles it, distributes the traffic, goes to all of these different servers, the web services, and after about half an hour, people start to switch off. People can leave, right? Because you go into it, you read one article, you read, check your stocks, read the gossip, watch the cartoon, whatever you need, right? So within an hour, the traffic's gone right up and then right down. What do you think they do after an hour? They switch the machines off again. They go back down to that. So they're only paying for 1 hour of 10 extra EC2 machines every time there's a news blast come up, instead of running 57 machines all the time. Isn't that smart? So it's just one way that they can do load balancing with scaling on a somewhat automatic, semi-automatic system. Yeah? It's a great concept of how they do that. I'm not going to talk, I'll talk a little bit about optimization for load. All of you are probably experiencing this in some degree. Maybe your variation is on a day-by-day basis. Maybe your variation is on a month-by-month, or sometimes during the year you'll have more. sometimes you have less traffic. Use the ability for yourself to switch off those machines automatically based on a threshold, maybe on the CPU, maybe on the network. Maybe you say, how many users have connected to my machine in the last 1 hour? If it's less than 50, switch one machine off. If it's more than 100, switch another machine on. So vary your cost, you know, change the temperature. Just like the thermostat and the air conditioning. It gets too hot, switches on. It gets cool enough, switches off. It saves power. It's not going to run the whole time, same speed all the time, right? And you can have tremendous savings here. You just switch on, switch off during the night only. Right? You can actually save tremendous money. A good example is something like Pinterest. Right? Very popular website. A worldwide network, this is a year ago, worldwide network is running $52 per hour to run it during the day. So at night they were only paying $15 per hour. So they switched off so many of the machines. When America sleeps, no one surfs the web, mostly. So it goes up and down, right? Talking about database a bit, you've all heard about multi-AZ, right? If you have one database, make sure you click on that multi-AZ basis. We've reduced the price recently of multi-AZ. So it used to be double the price, now it's a little bit less. But you can run a slave or a standby machine in another AZ if one of them goes down.